Hello again, everyone. This is Professor Casey. Today we're discussing Lesson 3 for my INRW students, and this one is over subject-verb agreement. Okay. Now that we've gone over the parts of speech and we've gone over the parts of a sentence, the subjects, predicates, and objects, now we can kind of mesh the two together and take the next step. Okay, and this is the part where the quote-unquote grammar Nazis begin to come out. Okay, this is where anytime you have an instructor who is very particular about how you use grammar in a sentence, how you use verbs and so forth as they relate to the subject in the sentence, it's very easy to get the two mixed up sometimes. Okay, in some cases the wording is not exactly clear, and we tend to write the way that we think, and we tend to think the way that we speak. Okay, so whenever we see this type of thing on an actual written form, like what you're about to see here, sometimes it doesn't always mesh with what we have in our minds, okay, with the way that we think it sounds and the way that we normally say it out loud in a sentence. Okay, so for the purposes of academic writing, you'll kind of get to see how all this fits together here. Now, as far as the contents go for this particular lesson, I have a few different things that I want to cover. The first thing, of course, that we have to cover is just the basics, okay, just the simple rules of subject-verb agreement. Okay, and it's a pretty simple little rule. I'll kind of try to simplify it as much as I can anyway. We use that for the basis for the rest of this. We'll talk a little bit about possessive case now that we have kind of introduced you a little bit to pronouns and so forth. Now you'll get to see how possessive case comes into play. We'll talk a bit about compound subjects because, again, sentences eventually will start to get more and more complicated over time with a lot of the examples that you see. So we'll try to go back to using the same basic rule for all of this, but we'll just apply it in a different way. And then finally, we'll talk a little bit more about pronouns and specifically what we call indefinite pronouns. Okay, so I'll try to, again, simplify this as much as I possibly can and give you as many visual examples as possible. Okay, so the most basic rule that goes along with this, okay, when it comes to subjects and verbs, if you recall back from our previous lessons, okay, the subject in the sentence, remember, is the noun that is performing an action, okay, whatever noun is actually doing something, okay, a person, place, thing, or idea performing an action, okay, and the verb, of course, we've already established, is the action itself. Okay, so we have the subject of the sentence, the thing doing the action, and the action that is being performed. That's what we're scrutinizing here. So when it comes to this, the two have to agree with each other when it comes to numbers. Okay. Now, when it comes to numbers here, what we're talking about is if we have a single subject or a plural subject. Okay. Plural just means more than one. Okay. And when you see the examples here, like I said, it'll make a little bit more sense. If you have a singular subject, okay, if you have one thing performing an action, then the verb that comes after it always ends with the letter S, okay? If you have a plural subject, if you have more than one thing acting as a subject, then the verb usually does not end with an S, okay? So it's kind of a trade-off here. Singular subject does end in S, plural subject does not end in S. Okay? And this is the most basic rule of subject-verb agreement. And when you see it in a sentence in a context, again, it'll make a little bit more sense here. So a very simple example I can give you here is Earth rotates. Okay? Rotates around the sun, right? So for this sentence, okay, like we said before, the two most basic things you need for a sentence to work are a noun and a verb, right? In this case, a subject and a verb. Okay? Subject, of course, is Earth, right? Earth is a singular subject, right? It is one thing, okay? So Earth, being a singular subject, therefore has a verb that comes after it, rotates, that ends in S, okay? In other words, it works as Earth rotates, but it won't work if you put Earth rotate, okay? It sounds a little bit weird. So again, just to kind of hammer home the point here, because we have a singular subject, Earth, okay, then the verb rotates ends with an S. It's just that simple. Now the opposite, like I said before, is also true. Okay, here we have an example. It says the sun's rays are weakest at the poles. Okay, it's a little bit more of a complicated sentence here, but this one works with a little bit of a helping verb here with the word are. Okay, are, of course, actually is just a word that is just the act of existing. Okay, it's a passive verb here. So the sun's rays, okay, rays specifically here, if we're looking at the simple subject, remember, rays is plural, okay, we're talking about more than one ray, okay, and therefore if we have a plural subject, then the verb that comes after it, the existing verb, are, does not end in s. Okay, so in other words, you would say the sun's rays are weakest at the poles, and not the sun's rays is weakest at the poles. Okay, again, sounds a little bit weird if you say it the other way. Okay, so again, this is just the written out version of it. Okay, because we have a plural subject, sun's rays. Okay, therefore the verb is are and not is. Okay? So again, that's just the most basic rule of all this. Again, it's a trade-off: singular subject, verb with an s; plural subject, verb with no s. Now just a few more examples here, just to, again, give you some more exposure to this. This one says, how blank scientists explain Earth's magnetic poles. Okay, this one comes in the form of a question, so it's a little bit off here, but here what we're looking at is the word scientists. Okay, scientists, okay, is going to be our plural subject. Okay. And here we have a helping verb that we're looking at specifically. Okay? Because it comes in the form of a question, we have to kind of shift it around a little bit. Okay? But here, our plural subject, again, is scientists. Okay? And because we have a plural subject, then the verb that we're looking for here between do and does is going to be the one that does not end in s, which in this case is do. Okay? How do scientists explain Earth's magnetic poles? Okay? And not how does scientists explain. Okay? So again, the one that comes in the form of a question is a little bit tricky because you have to kind of shift things around a little bit in your mind, but we'll give you another example or two here. Here's one that's a little bit simpler, okay? Light blank in straight lines. Okay, this one's a little bit more straightforward, okay? So you have a subject here, light, okay? This is the thing doing the action, okay? And because it is a singular subject, okay, then the verb ends with an s. So it's light travels in straight lines and not light travel. Again, for a lot of people, and especially if you have English as your first language, this might seem like second nature. Okay, it might seem pretty simple so far, not too confusing. Some people may not even have to think much about it. Okay, but if you have English as a second language and you're not entirely sure of yourself, hopefully this will kind of help a little bit. Here's another one, same basic rule. Gravity blank us from floating away. Okay? And because gravity, again, is a singular subject, then the verb ends in s. So gravity keeps us from floating away. Last example here, the moon blank Earth's tides. Okay, again, single subject, moon. Okay, so we have a verb that ends with an s, affects. All right, so now we can move on to talking a bit about possessive case. Okay? Now, when we're discussing possessive case, we're using the same rule that we just established. Okay? The subject and the verb in the sentence have to agree with each other when it comes to a number. Okay? So if you have a singular subject, you also have a verb that ends with an s. If you have a plural subject, you have a verb that does not end with an s. Okay? Same basic rules apply here, except we're talking about taking possession of something. And this time it depends also on what verb tense we're discussing here. Okay? And I can simplify it a little bit more using this particular chart here. Okay? Now, if you look up, before you look at the example at the bottom here, looking at the chart on the right here, okay, we have two different categories here. We have singular and plural, just like we had before. Okay? When we're discussing the subject. This time, though, when we're talking about possessive case, we're discussing the possessive case of what the subject is doing. Okay? So the subject is I, you, he, she, it, we, you all, or they, okay? Depending on what column you're looking at here. Okay? So when we're discussing verb tense, okay, we have three different rows that go here. First person, second person, and third person. Okay. Now, this is usually something that you might see when you're learning any kind of language. Okay, if you're learning English, if you're learning Spanish, if you're learning French or any other language, you have to conjugate a verb in some way in order for it to make sense in the sentence. Okay, and again, English kind of follows the same basic rules. Okay, it takes a cue from Latin languages in this way. Okay, so going down each one of these columns here. Okay, looking at first person, okay, the first person verb tense refers to the self, okay? If you're using first person or if you're writing in first person, you're talking about yourself, okay? You're using the pronoun I, okay? I is the most basic pronoun because you're talking about yourself, okay? So if you're using I, okay, I is, of course, something that is singular here, okay? So you're talking about yourself. This time, the rules change a little bit, okay? Because here, if you're talking about I, then you have the word have after it. So it's I have, not I has, okay? So this is a little bit different from the rule that we had before, okay? But you can use this chart anytime that you need to, okay? Now, when we're discussing first person plural, okay, if we're including ourselves in with a group, for example, okay, then we're using the same word. We have, okay. Now, if we move on to the second person is you are directly addressing another individual, okay. So second person here is you have, okay. It works the same way. Second person plural is if you are addressing a crowd of people. Okay, you are a singular person addressing two or more people. Okay, so it's the same thing. You have, sometimes we say you all have, or if you're from Texas, y'all, right? Moving down to third person now. Third person, you're not including yourself anymore, okay? It's not you as an individual directly addressing another person. You're speaking a little bit more neutrally here, okay? And that's a little bit confusing for some people, okay? Having to take yourself out of the equation here. But third person singular, you're discussing another individual, okay, right? Another singular individual or a singular object, okay? So third person, he, she, or it has, okay? Now it changes, okay? Third person plural, though, if you're discussing multiple people in a different place who you are not addressing, okay, or if you're discussing multiple objects somewhere that you are not addressing, okay, then it becomes they have, okay, we go back to have again. So in this whole chart, the possessive word have is being used in every single situation except for third person singular. Okay? That is the only time it changes. Okay? So when we look at examples, again, sometimes just one particular word or another will make sense to some people. Okay? It sounds like second nature. It sounds like it would work. Sometimes you have to look at it and actually compare it on the chart to make sure that it makes sense. Okay? So for the sake of the example here, going back to that now, okay, we have air has weight. Okay? Air is our subject here. Okay? Now, what I like to say here about trying to figure this out in all this, if you're given the choice between have and has here, okay, we already know that it's the word has. But if you're given the choice here, if you look at the subject, air, okay, air is not me, so it's not singular. It's not first person. Okay? It is singular, but it's not first person. Air is not you, so it's not second person. Air is third person. Okay? It's not you and it's not me. Okay? And if we know that it's singular, then we know it's third person singular. And looking at the chart here, we know that the verb has to be has. Okay? Pretty simple, right? And we can do the same thing for any other example. Okay? If we look at the pronoun here, okay, if it says I, then we know automatically the word is have. I have a dog. Second person singular, same thing. You have a cat. Okay? If it's we know it's we have. Okay? They, we know it's they have. Okay? So if it's me, then it's have. If it's you, then it's have. If it's us or we, then it's have. If it's they or them, then it's have. But if it's he, she, it, if it's a person's name, if we're talking about a single person, anything that is not you, not me, something else, and singular, then it's has. Okay, hopefully that makes a little bit of sense. And just like with anything else, seeing it in context will sometimes help it make more sense. Okay? A cheetah blank the ability to run at 60 miles per hour. Okay? So here, cheetah is going to be our subject. Okay? So looking at this, again, if you want to use the chart, if it's confusing for you, okay, a cheetah is not me, and a cheetah is not you. So we know that it's third person, okay? And a cheetah here, we're talking about a cheetah, a singular cheetah. So it's third person, singular. So we know automatically that it's has. Okay? A cheetah has the ability to run at 60 miles per hour. Another example, I blank an older sister. Okay, so we're talking about me here, I. Okay, if it's I, we know automatically it's have. I have an older sister. Here's another one, you. Okay, you blank a nice personality. Okay, if we know that it's not me, but it is you, okay, then you have a nice personality. And finally here, Angie blank a new car. Okay, now we know Angie is not me. We know Angie's not you, chances are. We're discussing Angie. Okay, then we know Angie is a third person, and Angie is singular. She's only one individual. So if it's third person singular, just like the cheetah up here, okay, Angie has a new car. Now moving on to compound subjects, this is where it can get to be a little bit confusing again. Okay, possessive case is a little confusing, so is compound subjects, depending on how complicated the sentence gets. Okay. Now, what a compound subject is, this is where we have two or more things that are coming together to form a subject. Okay, and these two things, these two subjects, okay, usually it's two nouns, are linked together by a conjunction. Now, if you recall from lesson 1, okay, a conjunction is a word that links two things together in a sentence. Okay, words like and, but, or, however, because, those kinds of words. Okay, and depending on what conjunction is being used in the sentence, okay, whatever conjunction is being used to connect the subjects together, that is going to determine whether it is a singular compound subject or a plural compound subject. Okay? So I'll give you a few examples here. Again, we're still using the same basic rule as always, but it all depends on making it fit. So this is kind of a complicated sentence here. Okay? Either volcanic activity or an asteroid was responsible for wiping out the dinosaurs. Okay? Now, what we're looking at here, again, is not only the nouns that make up the subject, volcanic activity and asteroid. Those are specifically, if we want to narrow it down to the singular versions, okay, the simple versions. Activity and asteroid. Those are the two words that we're using here to make a compound subject. And the conjunction that links them together is the combination either or. Okay? Either volcanic activity or an asteroid. Okay? Anytime you have either or neither nor at the beginning here, okay, in a compound subject, then that makes it a singular subject. Okay? Okay, so hopefully this makes sense so far. Either or neither nor makes this a singular subject. Okay, so either volcanic activity or an asteroid. Okay, so now we know that our compound subject then, based on the conjunction being used, is a singular subject. Okay, now if we know that, then we can go back to our original rule. Okay, if it is a singular subject, then the verb ends with an S. Okay, so now we have either volcanic activity or an asteroid was responsible for wiping out the dinosaurs. Okay? So in other words, it's was responsible, not were responsible. Okay? And again, the same basic rule applies to the opposite. Okay? And here we're looking at a different conjunction. Okay? Dry weather and drought contribute to wildfires. Okay? So now we're looking at, again, isolating the two nouns that make up this subject, dry weather, drought, okay, or specifically weather and drought if we look at the simple subjects here. And now we have a different conjunction. We have the conjunction and, okay? If we have the conjunction and in a compound subject linking these two nouns together, which we do, then it makes it a plural subject, dry weather and drought, okay? So now if we have a plural subject, again, we go back to the original rule, okay? A plural subject means that our verb does not end with an S, okay? So it's dry weather and drought contribute to wildfires, not dry weather and drought contributes, okay? So again, when it comes to seeing it in a written form and looking at the actual rules of it, sometimes it seems like it contradicts the way that we normally say it out loud, okay? And again, this is academic writing versus what we call, what's the word I'm looking for here? Just a casual way of saying it, vernacular. Okay, vernacular is, there's an old Three Stooges joke about this, right, if you want to go look that up. But vernacular is just the way that we speak on a normal basis, okay? And we violate academic rules of speech and writing all the time, okay? It's just how we are as human beings. We try to take shortcuts with the way that we speak and think and so forth. But when it comes to writing, sometimes we have to follow the rules. And this, unfortunately, is one of those rules that's a little bit more rigid. Okay, so some instructors will get to be a little bit pickier about this, specifically in English classes, okay? But it helps to kind of know the rule just in case you're ever kind of pushed into a corner about this and you're not quite sure about it. Okay, so hopefully this will just kind of give you a few examples that are somewhat set in stone, if you like, that you can use in the future. And again, seeing it in context always helps, okay? And sometimes it just makes more sense one way or the other. Now, the first example here is one that does get people confused, okay? This one says, neither Mahatma Gandhi nor Dr. Martin Luther King blank in support of violence, okay? Now, in this particular case, again, we're looking at the conjunction being used at the beginning, okay? We know Mahatma Gandhi and Dr. Martin Luther King are two nouns, right, two people that we are linking together in the subject using a conjunction. And the conjunction here is neither nor, okay? And because it is neither nor, okay, this means that we have a singular subject, okay? And if we have a singular subject, then the verb that is going to be used here is supposed to end with an S. So it's neither Mahatma Gandhi nor Dr. Martin Luther King was in support of violence. Now this one is one that always confuses my students because they almost always want to use were here. And even I, when I look at this for the very first time, anytime I go back to look at it, it seems like were is going to be the one that's correct, okay? And again, this is just where the way that we speak and think ends up separating from the actual rule, okay? So again, saying it out loud, you won't always get somebody who's going to try to correct you that way. Most people's brains don't work that fast. But if you look at this in a written form, this is how it's supposed to look. This one's a little bit simpler and makes more sense, okay? Both a python and a boa blank the ability to detect heat, okay? And here we have a plural subject, python and a boa, okay? Two words linked together by and. And if you have a plural subject, which we do, then there is no S on the verb. So it's have the ability to detect heat, not has. Another one here, viruses and bacteria blank prevented from entering your body through the skin. Okay, so viruses and bacteria, just like we had up above here, we have a plural subject, viruses and bacteria, so we know there's not going to be an S on the verb. Viruses and bacteria are prevented, not is prevented. And for those of you who are pop culture nerds as I am, Luke and Leia blank siblings in the Star Wars films, okay? And of course, just like we had in the above two examples, if we have and linking these two together, okay, Luke and Leia, we know it's a plural subject, and therefore there is no S on the verb. So it's they are siblings in the Star Wars films. So again, I hope this makes a little bit more sense for you, okay? Now, the last thing that we'll talk about here is indefinite pronouns. Okay. Now, when we discuss pronouns, we typically have a general idea of whether we're talking about something that is male, female, or neutral. Okay, something that is neither male nor female. Okay. And indefinite pronouns are any time that we have a pronoun that is presented, but we don't really get a specific number, okay, being used here. Okay, we don't know how many of this particular pronoun we're talking about. Okay, it's not very clear. And so we have to clarify it a little bit using the verb. And so there's two different types here. There's our singular indefinite pronouns, okay, words like someone, somebody, anyone, everyone, and each. Okay, so what I like to say here when it comes to singular indefinite pronouns is anytime you have some at the beginning or any at the beginning, okay, then you know that we're talking about something singular, some or any or every, okay? So someone, somebody, anyone, anybody, everyone, everybody, okay? Again, it's kind of a blanket thing that makes it singular. And then, of course, each, okay? We're talking about each and every individual one. And we also have plural indefinite pronouns, okay? Plural ones are a little bit more diverse, okay? You have several different words that can be used here. Several, few, both, many, lots, okay? Something that just kind of gives you an idea of having multiple pronouns of some kind, okay? And again, explaining it sometimes sounds a little bit more confusing than just seeing it in context. Each Galapagos tortoise is protected by law, okay? So if Galapagos tortoise is going to be our subject here, okay? It's the thing doing the action, okay? The verb being used here is, okay? We know is just means existing, okay? But at the beginning of this, okay, before the subject even appears, we have an indefinite pronoun, each, okay? And this is the same basic rule, again, going all the way back to the beginning, okay? Each, we already know from above here, is a singular indefinite pronoun, okay? And Galapagos tortoise is our subject, so we're talking about one Galapagos tortoise, okay? So each Galapagos tortoise, if we have a singular subject, therefore, then the verb ends with an S, just like always, okay? So each Galapagos tortoise is protected by law, not each Galapagos tortoise are protected by law. There's another one. Somebody is at the door. Okay, we already know that somebody, looking at this list up here, somebody, we're talking about one singular individual. Somebody, okay, a body, an individual, right? Same rule as always. If we know it's a singular subject, it's a singular indefinite pronoun. Here we don't actually have a noun telling us what we're talking about. Okay, somebody, we're talking about something singular. So if we have a singular subject, there is an S on the verb. Somebody is at the door, not somebody are at the door. And again, the same thing works for plural pronouns. Okay? Several religions observe certain holidays. Okay? We already know that several, looking at the list up here, several is a plural indefinite pronoun. Okay? We don't know how many religions we're talking about, we just know that it's more than one. Okay? And of course, religions already has an S on the end of it, so we know we're talking about plural religions. Okay? So several religions makes it a plural subject. So then the verb observe does not end with S. So several religions observe certain holidays, not several religions observes. So here at last, we'll give you some more examples of indefinite pronouns just to close this out. If anyone blank interested, I have an extra ticket to the movies tonight. Okay. Now here, we're looking for the indefinite pronoun, which in this case is the word anyone. Okay. And we already know anyone or anybody, okay, if we're talking about one or a body, okay, or any, we're talking about something singular. Okay. So if it is a singular subject, then the verb ends with an S. If anyone is interested, I have an extra ticket to the movies tonight. Both brothers blank in the same class. Okay, here we have the word brothers already gives it away because it's plural. Okay, and the word both tells us that we're talking about two things very specifically. Okay? So both brothers, we're talking about two brothers, are in the same class then, okay? Because there's no S on the verb if we have a plural pronoun. Few people blank aware of the environment. Okay, people here, we already might guess, is a plural noun. Okay, we're talking about more than one person. Okay, so if we say few people, okay, few means more than two, but not very much more. Okay, so few people are aware of the environment. Okay, so it's are, no S on the verb.